Hey guys, I'm Brian with Waypoint Defensive, and today let's go over some basic handgun uses and techniques that we can apply in self-defense scenarios. Now, some video courses will actually just go over the basics of handgun techniques and application. But we at Waypoint Defensive, we really want to emphasize on how we can apply this in practical real-world scenarios. We have a moral and ethical responsibility to try to impart some of this training. All right, so let's go over some handgun techniques and applications. Let's go downstairs and actually practice some of this. I'll show you the steps. All right, now that we're downstairs in the studio, let's go over some handgun uses and techniques. But first, we're going to remove the live firearm I have on me, a Glock 19, safely respecting all four of the firearm safety rules, and I'm going to place this firearm in an area that I'm not going to be able to access it. I'm going to replace it with a SIRT pistol. This is inert, it has no ammunition, and it's non-functional. This will be excellent for our training purposes to make sure that we don't disrespect or break any of the four firearm safety rules. So first, let's discuss some carry positions of concealed carry firearms. Now, there's a lot of debate on this, and a lot of it boils down to personal preference, but let me give you a few suggestions. We carry at Waypoint Defensive predominantly in the appendix position, which is right here. One of the benefits for this is that if you live in Nashville or a large city, that this is your bubble. So if you meet anybody, people walk up to you, they have to get inside your bubble. Your firearm is always here. As opposed to a 5 o'clock position, in which case, if I was standing here and just talking to folks, more people can see me print or have direct access to my firearm until I turn around. Printing of a firearm is what happens when you blatantly display or you can see the outline of the firearm with your shirt. As you can see with appendix, it's actually easy to conceal. Based off your body type, you may get away with certain other positions. But real quick, let me show you the 5 o'clock position on me. I'm 6'1" and about 220 pounds. This is carrying a firearm concealed at the 5 o'clock position. Remember that placement and positioning of a concealed carry firearm is based off your personal preference and your body type. All right. Now let's go over the steps to draw from concealment from the 5 o'clock position. Step 1, clear your cover garment. Step 2, firm purchase on the firearm. 3, draw up high to the nipple line. 4, press out. So now let's discuss reholstering back to the 5 o'clock position. Step 1, tuck the firearm in, high point of retention. Step 2, clear your cover garment. Step 3, slowly and reluctantly find your holster, reholster, and conceal. Those are the simple steps. All right, now let's go over the process, the steps of drawing from concealment from the appendix position and then reholstering. So, step 1, clear your cover garment. 2, good purchase on firearm. 3, high point of retention. 4, grip and press out. Now, when you reholster, always be highly cognizant of where your muzzle is pointing. So, to go back in reverse, to reholster, pull back to a high point of retention, clear your cover garment, cognizant of where your muzzle is pointing, slowly and reluctantly reholster, conceal. Now let's discuss some common mistakes that are performed during the drawing process. One mistake is called bowling. As you pull your pistol, this sometimes occurs by the novice shooter. Performing this draw begins with a muzzling of yourself, sweeps low, and comes out, simulating a bowling technique. The problem with this is in close quarters, if there was someone else here or an obstacle, doing this draw will cause you to hit the object. It's also not a secure point of retention as we teach in the draw process. Another common error is called fishing. So from the draw process, people pull up, go super high, and perform what is known as a fishing technique. This was typically seen a lot in movies, especially in the era of like the 80s, early 90s. This is also cumbersome because this is not a good point of retention and it takes too long for you to properly acquire sights on target, as opposed to a point of high retention and press out to a natural point of aim.
Hey guys. So since Brian's a bigger guy and I'm not, I'm about 6 foot 170 or so, you might think that you absolutely can't conceal a firearm on a smaller frame. So this is the same size gun that Brian was using, and it's actually a little bit bigger than the firearm that I carry. But while it's not completely hidden, for the most part, it's relatively hidden. So just wanted to show you that I'm wearing like a fitted dress shirt here and fitted jeans, and I have a firearm right in my appendix position. And it's easily accessible from this position.
Grip on a firearm, also known as purchase in some areas, is highly important for the functionality and for the effective use of a firearm. Your main dominant hand should remain high on the firearm, close to the slide. Your second hand actually fills the gap. Both thumbs are forward, and this is a correct gripping position on a firearm. Keep in mind that this hand applies pressure front and back, and this hand that fills in the gap applies pressure left and right. If done appropriately, there should be no tension on the trigger finger, and your thumbs should remain forward. Now let's look at the components of a grip from the opposite side. So, dominant hand, once again noting high up on the tang into the webbing of the grip, so that this is the positioning of your hand. Also noting that your grip goes front to back with your dominant hand. Your left hand slides up, fills in the gaps, and assumes a proper grip. Notice that the non-dominant hand grips and wraps around the fingers of the dominant hand to apply pressure left and right, leaving your trigger finger free to make an appropriate press. So common mistakes in the grip are as follows. A lot of people will not get a high grip on the firearm and will instead do this. By not filling in this gap, with each press of the trigger, you're allowing the firearm to rock because your hand is lower than the bore axis or the level in which the bullets leave the gun. Another common mistake in firearm gripping is this. The overlocked thumb technique is a carryover from revolvers back in the day. Many people never adjusted this grip for modern semi-automatic firearms. This allows more play when manipulating the trigger and causes your shots to veer left. Another common mistake is called T-cupping. We see this a lot. It's a carryover from the 80s, back when people also shot revolvers. The problem with this is while it does feel stationary on a horizontal plane, it does not allow for control of the muzzle when you manipulate the trigger. One of the main fundamentals of grip is applying both thumbs forward, giving good pressure on the firearm to alleviate stress on the trigger finger. As the trigger is in contact with the finger, the press should go straight back. However, since the biomechanics of a finger do not allow a simple straight back process because your finger curves, we must have a proper grip with thumbs forward to counteract the curvature of the finger as opposed to a straight back process which we trained for. Now, utilizing a cleared firearm with no ammunition present and good sights, we'll go over sight alignment and sight picture. So, two components of a sight, your front sight and your rear sight. A proper sight alignment is the correct orientation of your front sight to your rear sight. In this case of big dots, your front sight should sit above your rear sight marker. When we press out and obtain a proper sight alignment with the big dot, or in other cases the front post, on the target, we shift our focus from the rear sight alignment with the front dot to the front sight. It's pivotal to pay attention and focus on the front sight, since where the front sight moves, the round will also go. It's a misconception that you always focus on your target. Doing so will shift your attention from your sight alignment to the target, resulting in changes from point of aim to point of impact. Point of aim is where the sight alignment meets the target. Point of impact is the difference in between where the round hits as opposed to where your sight alignment was. It's important to figure out which eye is your dominant eye. Your brain favors one side versus the next, much like some people are right-handed or left-handed. To do this, very simple. Make a triangle or a diamond with your hands. Focus on a spot in the distance. Keep both eyes open and look through that triangle or diamond at the object. And then slowly, without thinking about it too awfully much, keep your focus on the object, but move your hands back to your face. As you can see, I favor one side versus the next. That's how you determine your dominant eye. Some people are right-handed and right eye dominant. So, how does this affect them? When we present a pistol and we press out, the shift of where that pistol is correlates with which eye you're dominant. This can cause a lot of confusion when shooters use both eyes, because in theory, you should see two front sight posts or two rear sight posts, depending on your focal plane. After a while, you'll get used to this, and aligning it with your dominant eye will help you make fast and accurate hits. Now let's talk about trigger control. Trigger control is very, very important. And what do we mean by that? Well, when we draw and present our pistol, this being a SIRT pistol, so we know it's safe, you must always demonstrate proper trigger control first by indexing with your trigger finger on the frame of the firearm so that when we draw a firearm, and this is blatantly incorrect, we're not doing this. from the get-go. Very bad. That's how negligent discharges or accidental discharges occur. Because as you pull, you'll notice that finger on the trigger with pressure. If you get bumped, now the gun goes off. So every draw, proper trigger control, finger placement outside the guard as such until you press out and you're ready to go. When we apply our finger to the trigger, we do not over-insert. We do not under-insert, but we place this portion of the finger onto the trigger. As we press out, place our finger on the trigger, we take up the slack. The slack is the movement of the trigger before resistance is felt. When we take up the slack, we hit what is known as the wall. On most triggers, anywhere from 4 to 5.5 pounds of pull will break the wall. After we're done and we complete our shot, our finger comes back, finds the wall again, or if the threat is neutralized, we remove our finger and place it in index position.
So we found that when it comes to trigger placement, most people will teach that you want what Brian was just showing us directly in the middle of your finger. It's all well and good, but your particular biomechanics, you might need to come in a little bit more into the trigger. So like this is what most people will teach right there. You might need to come in a little bit closer. Just be aware that as soon as you get into your actual knuckle, you are going to pretty much unequivocally be missing your shots. You're going to be pulling the gun as you pull the trigger. I mean, you can see the kind of motion that adds to the gun. So I actually, for myself, instead of being halfway up the trigger, I actually get a little bit closer to the knuckle. I've just found through practice and training that for me, that is the way that I can most clearly press the trigger.
Now let's talk about trigger reset. This is a basic fundamental concept of marksmanship that is often overlooked. And for beginners, it's pivotal to understand this process. Later, we change it up a little bit. But for now, as we press out our pistol, we place our finger on the trigger, we slowly press back, find the wall, break the wall, and we discharge a round. You'll notice that I did not let go of the trigger. Instead, when we apply pressure, find the wall, break the wall, discharge the round, we must teach ourselves initially to press the trigger in the rearward position and hold it. After such, we slowly release pressure until you feel an audible or tactile click. That's finding the wall again, and it's also known as resetting the trigger or trigger reset. This allows me to simply apply pressure, the same amount of pressure as it took earlier, to break the wall and discharge another round. If you don't successfully reset your trigger, then you have this much more play in the trigger on each movement. And as we learned earlier with this grip, since the finger curves and does not press back in a straight line, the more movement that we have, the more the gun on right-handed shooters will want to move or shift left. So instead, wall, break wall, trigger press to the rearward, slow release, tactile or audible click, that's the reset and reestablishment of the wall, press again. Doing this will see huge improvements in your grouping and your basic marksmanship skills. Now let's talk about stances and how they affect the fundamentals of shooting. Waypoint Defensive does have some suggestions, but we'll go over that shortly. Right now, let's just talk about what is a normal stance. Right now, I'm standing upright, chest up, back straight, feet are parallel, and I'm in a comfortable position. The weight is evenly balanced mid-foot. I'm not leaning forward, and I'm not on my heels. I'm in a neutral stance or neutral position. The isosceles position, or isosceles stance, is a modification of this neutral positioning. Keeping my feet shoulder width apart, weight balanced mid-foot, I then present my pistol using your traditional 4-step process. Insert pistol, and I press out. Notice that my feet did not change, my body weight did not shift, and I presented my pistol out directly in front of me. From the side, it looks like this. This position will be easier to also notice that my weight is not forward, where I want to take a step forward. I'm not backwards with my weight shifted to my heels. My shoulders should be above my hips, and I'm not doing this. This allows for better recoil management since the gun will push into my shoulders, and I absorb that by locking everything out. Now let's talk about the Weaver stance. The Weaver stance is slightly different than the stance we practiced earlier and is a throwback to an older time where people handled their firearms slightly differently. And while it is applicable to certain situations, and some people do find it more comfortable, we do prefer the isosceles, at least here at Waypoint Defensive. So, to note the differences, as we stand in a neutral position as such, the Weaver stance changes your footing. So as we draw and press out, you'll notice that my weight is shifted, so is my upper body, and my face is in line with my dominant arm. Now, real quickly, let's discuss loading and unloading a firearm. In this case, I'll be using my Glock 19. There are no rounds, and the firearm is safe for the purposes of this video. To load a magazine and to subsequently load your firearm, take your magazine, indexed appropriately in the same direction the bullets will be facing. Using gross motor skills, connect your index finger with your pinky, which will align to the mag well. Insert your magazine firmly with a click. Reach over your slide, being careful of the ejection port. Pull back and release. This will strip around from the magazine into the chamber, and your firearm will be prepared to fire. A common error on loading a firearm is this. Once again, inserting the magazine, indexing, finger to pinky, into the mag well with a click. Some people will ride the slide like this. Doing that will actually sometimes cause the slide to go out of battery or to be in this position. If the slide is in this position, it will not discharge a round. Another method for loading a firearm is, once again, indexing the magazine to the pinky, to the mag well, insertion with a click, is manipulation of the slide lock lever. By forcing this down with your thumb, you will allow the slide to move forward, stripping a round off the magazine and loading into the chamber, like this. Now to unload your semi-automatic firearm, first we depress the magazine release button. Sometimes your magazine will not freely fall from the pistol and will require a pull. Once the magazine has been removed, cycle the slide of the pistol to ensure there's not another cartridge in the chamber. You can also pull back, manipulate the slide lock lever to keep the slide in a rearward position, confirming that the pistol is in fact unloaded.